Hey everybody, Referral from AstartesGaming here, back with another look at Chronicles of Elyria. Today we're going to be checking out Design Journal number 7, which is going to cover contracts and player-created professions. Or in my little, wait, no, other way, that way. In my little thing, it's custom professions, because I couldn't fit it all. But anyways, let's read through the intro here, and then I'll kind of talk about what we are going to be looking at. So in most MMOs today, roles such as shopkeeper, merchant, innkeeper, bounty hunter, and courier, when even possible, are constrained by the rules of the game engine. Things like quests or tasks, parties and raids, trade, auction houses, and mail systems are either NPC-driven or governed by built-in game mechanics. Instead of providing opportunities for immersion, role-playing, and dramatic situations, they act as a fourth wall, forcing players to interact in the world like a theme park rather than with the world. In this week's Design Journal, we're going to talk about player contracts. Perhaps the most important feature of Chronicles of Elyria. Contracts give power back to the players, unlocking an infinite number of occupations and professions and allowing them to play roles in Elyria even we haven't thought of. The foundation for marriages, guilds, trade agreements, in-game mail systems, families, and even governments. Contracts play a crucial role in Chronicles of Elyria and solidifies its place as one of the first true sandbox MMOs. So for those of you who have seen like Sword Art Online or Log Horizon, those are two very good like MMO animes. They're about people that get lost or stuck in the game. They're two very, very good animes if you are interested in that sort of thing. But they are very good analogs for this. In those particular animes, the characters not only fight in battles and raids and such, but they also have occupations where you're running a storefront or something to that effect. So in this game, you will have players who are dedicated farmers or dedicated blacksmiths, etc. And so you're not just going to be going into your little crafting hub, whipping up some stuff, throwing it on the auction block, and then going back to what you're doing. You're actually going to be running a real business in this game. And so the best game I can think of to compare this sort of thing to is probably, oh man, I don't know. I think Star Wars Galaxies had a little bit of this, but I'm trying to think of what the game is called, and I'm totally blanking right now, so I'll come back to it. But yeah, let's scroll down here, and we've got a screenshot. This is in-game. And so we have what looks like a city. We have some different layers of armor here on the guy, and then these are merchant stalls, presumably run by either NPCs or players. And then we have like a building here that presumably you could purchase and run your business out of that. So for example, you might throw your forge right here, and then your storefront is inside there. I don't know, but yeah, all of those are potentially going to be in the game. So the purpose of contracts. Contracts in Chronicles of Elyria are the first and foremost. I need to start over here. I don't know. I'm going at this too quick. Contracts in Chronicles of Elyria are first and foremost about solving the trust issues inherent in existing MMORPGs. In our world, we negotiate, make deals, and provide cash in advance all the time. We do that because we trust the legal system and people's moral code. In most MMOs, there's no legal system to speak of, and the anonymity afforded by the internet often brings out the worst in people. Usually that's the case whether or not they have anonymity, but we'll go with that. This creates an environment where, rather than enabling massive collaboration, people are forced to play a game with potentially tens of thousands of people as a single-player game. Don't believe me? Let's take the classic example of needing to get an item built. You haven't raised your mining or blacksmithing skills, but you still want to be a competitive swordsman. You learn that there's a powerful sword, but to create it you need to gather 10 pounds of iron ore and some rare gems, in addition to having the necessary crafting recipe. First, you're going to realize that you don't have the necessary mining skill to harvest the ore or the gem. You have three options. Either raise your mining yourself, buy the items from an auction house, requiring no player interaction, or spam trade chat asking someone to trade with, which rarely creates long-term meaningful business relationships. And we'll scroll again here. Assuming you manage to procure the necessary materials, you're now faced with a second problem. Your lack of sufficient skill and likely the recipe to craft the item. The most logical solution would be to take the materials to an appropriately skilled craftsman and ask them to make it for you. But in doing so, you encounter the real trust issue. You've just acquired a very expensive, very rare gem, which you now must hand over to someone else for them to create the item for you. As you open the trade window, you ask yourself, what's stopping them from keeping these rare materials for themselves, selling it on the auction house, or even crafting the weapon and selling it back to me at higher than the agreed upon price? In most games, the answer is nothing. In Chronicles of Elyria, the answer is contracts. So let's look at initiating contracts. There are two types of contracts in Chronicles of Elyria, explicit and implicit, and each one is initiated differently. Explicit contracts are more like your traditional contracts. They're written documents which are reviewed and signed by all members who want to execute them. Signing the contract means you agree to uphold your end of the bargain or face the prearranged consequences. Contracts, explicit or implicit, can be one-on-one, can be one-to-one, one-to-many, or many-to-many. This allows for an agreement between you and another, between you and several other people, or amongst a collection of people. So here we've got another screenshot, and this is our first peek at the inventory system. So you do have a gridded inventory here with the trade agreement. Most things are stackable as long as they are not unique. I imagine a trade agreement would probably be unique once it's signed, and so it probably wouldn't stack. But for example, if you had a bunch of scrolls, they would stack in like tens or however many they decide. But it's cool that you actually like pull your backpack off and take a look at inside of it. That's kind of a nice touch. And they are using a weight capacity system, sort of like in the Elder Scrolls games or Fallout games. However, I imagine they're probably going to go with a much more realistic one and not allow you to carry like several 100 pounds of equipment with you at all times. I do know for sure that the more that you carry, the closer you get to your capacity, the more it will wear on your fatigue and your stamina. That I do know. Okay, so explicit contracts. As seen in Figure 2 above, explicit contracts function as any other object in your inventory. You can buy, sell, trade, examine, or activate them. When you activate a contract, you select another person to initiate a trade negotiation with, and just like there are different types of potions in the game, there are different types of contracts. Each type of contract acts like a template until the point in which it's activated. At that point, all the blank spots for things like names, quantities, costs, and references to items or activities are filled in during negotiation. You can see an example of an early trade contract in Figure 3 below. We'll look at that in just a second. As Chronicles of Elyria uses contracts in place of what would normally be quests or tasks in other MMOs, it shouldn't surprise you there are contract templates for many of the same activities you'd be asked to do in other RPGs. For example, there are contracts to deliver an item to someone, activate an item, destroy an item or building, capture or retrieve someone, or escort someone to a given location safely. And so here you can see the potential for all different kinds of quests and professions, because you have NPCs and players now giving you contracts to do things. For example, if you are a miner by trade, somebody might come to you and say, hey, we are going to be going to war very soon. We're going to need a lot of weapons. Can you dig up X amount of iron ore for us? And so you're going to sign the contract and try to fulfill it. And if you don't, there might be repercussions for that. So it's not just, check off that failed quest. You might have to compensate them because you weren't able to come through. Or, for example, if you were the blacksmith who was going to be making those swords and you accidentally botch a few of them and, ruin the materials. And so now you might be in a little bit of trouble because they were, asking you for 20 swords, but you only have like 16 because you messed up a couple. It's going to make for some interesting situations, but also very, very real situations, like organic situations, stuff that you would probably come across in your everyday life that would make this feel more immersive than, build sword 1 and just wait for the timer to run out and then build sword 2. So yeah, I like this. I like this a lot. By providing stock contracts for the above activities, it's immediately possible for players to create tasks in the same way NPCs do. You could log off for the day and leave your OPC behind, offering X amount of money or other objects in exchange for placing resources in your shop. When someone drops the resources in your warehouse, they can collect the money from you, but how does the Soulborn engine know the contract is complete? I'm glad you asked. I'm glad you asked for us. Characters going about their daily lives are constantly doing things. They're going in and out of regions, interacting with items, talking to people, trading, engaging in combat, etc. There are literally dozens of things your character can do while in Elyria, and each of them generates a character event. When you sign a contract, the Soulborn engine begins waiting for you to perform specific character events relating to the contract and uses those to track your progress. Okay, so they are almost literally like a quest system, is what I have gathered from this. So basically, it's a quest system wherein you and whoever is issuing the quest, or vice versa, you and whoever is going to be fulfilling the quest for you, negotiates all the terms of the quest, and then it becomes a quest just like in any other game. Let's see. This system is also used to help you track your progress on screen. Selecting a contract you've accepted from your inventory allows you to track the contract's objectives. This, like in most MMOs, gives you an on-screen reminder of what you're trying to do, and whenever you complete an objective, the user interface is updated to reflect your progress. So very, very cool. I do like this system quite a bit. It is, by all intents and purposes, a quest system, but it's a very organic one, and I think it fits a game that's shooting for immersion, like this one is, very, very well. Because you still have the quest system that people would expect from an RPG. It's just done in a much more immersion-friendly way. So I'm on board with this. I like this a lot. Let's read through authoring contracts, and then we'll take a look at the trade agreement at the bottom there. While we're not going to spend any time in this design journal talking about how crafting works, that'll be part of the next design journal. Yes, please. I did want to talk briefly about who writes them and who uses them. Contracts are complicated, even in our world. Well, they're even more complicated in our world, I would imagine. The more clauses and conditions they have, the more difficult they are to author correctly. When designing the contract system, we had a choice between making it something anyone can do and making it the focus of a specific type of crafter. In the end, we decided that contracts can be used by anyone while they're written by those with a specialization of the scribing skill called contract writing. In addition, how complex a contract can be, the number of clauses and conditions it supports, is directly proportional to the skill of the writer. So you basically have lawyers in this game now who write and proofread contracts. So that's another unique profession to this game, I imagine. I can't think of any other game where you would have somebody doing a job like that. Characters just starting out will only be able to write simple trade contracts, while those more advanced can write guild charters and patents, marriage agreements, and even laws. So obviously, for your average business owner, you can probably write your own trade contracts because they'll be very simple. Basically, I'll give you X amount of gold for X amount of iron ore, or something to that effect. I'll sell you this sword for 50 gold. Something very, very simple. I give you something, you give me something. However, for anything more advanced, you're going to need people who are actually dedicated to this skill, or at least dabble in it, for some of the less complicated stuff. But that means that people who want to be lawmakers and work in ruling capacities, or at least 4 people in ruling capacities, are going to have to actually specialize in this skill, which is cool because I think the more differentiation and specialization you have between players and their characters makes for a more unique world, because you don't have everybody being that warrior like they are in World of Warcraft, who just happens to occasionally craft some items to throw on the auction block. Alright, so let's look at this screenshot here. So we have trade agreement. I, insert name here, agree to give to the undersigned, insert other name here, to the undersigned, insert item here, in exchange for insert item or whatever you're going to be bartering with. If in the event I fail to deliver, may insert name here, receive compensation from my person at my own expense. If the undersigned does not deliver within a time frame of insert time here, he/she agrees that I or a representative may receive compensation from their person at their own expense. And I imagine there's different trade agreements where you might not necessarily have that kind of risk. For example, you and the other person agree that you want to try to make this trade happen, but there might be stuff that gets in the way, and if that's the case, then it's no big deal. I imagine there's probably a trade agreement that would allow you to kind of reflect that, or at least they would have the option of not pursuing any kind of compensation if they understand these circumstances. So contracts are made to be broken and enforced. Like most features in Chronicles of Elyria, the contract system introduces a fun new mechanic which is inherently exploitable. It's designed to increase your confidence that it's safe to do business with someone. However, like in our world, that's not always the case. Whenever you initiate a contract, there's a set of consequences for breaking it. If either party breaches the contract, they're at risk of having to pay the consequences. These consequences can be enforced, but it's up to you or someone on your behalf to enforce them. And so here we have even more potential for different professions. People, law bringers, sheriffs, people like that who are going to go and arrest people for breaking these contracts, or require them to compensate you for breaking them. And so let's see, enforcing contracts. We put systems in place to make enforcing contracts easier. Once the contract is believed to be broken, and assuming you have a copy of the contract, you can use it to generate a bounty token. So that's important to note, that you do need to have a copy of this contract. You can't just say, hey, I made a deal with this guy and he broke it. Can you go get him? You have to actually have proof, like, hey, here's our contract. He didn't fulfill it. And so you can't just make up like baseless claims. Although maybe you can. Maybe, well, I imagine you're doing with other players. Even if you didn't necessarily have the contract, you might be able to convince somebody to try to enforce it for you. But in order to generate a bounty token, you do need one. This token gives the possessor the right to apply consequence to the person who broke the contract. That's important as well, because without the contract, you don't have the bounty token, which means you don't have the right to enforce it. So if someone were to, say, like, steal the contract from you, they could prevent you from creating that bounty token, and would therefore, remove the right from you to enforce it. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get back at them. It just means that you may not be able to do it through completely legitimate terms. This can mean taking money or items off of them, reclaiming things from their homes, or even incapacitating them and bringing them back to face justice. Which type of consequences are allowed is based on regional laws. Depending on the county you are in, it may be legal to retrieve your stuff yourself. In other counties, it may be necessary for a sheriff to reclaim your goods, and in yet other counties, those which have chosen a more lawless disposition, there may be no way to enforce your contract at all. As I mentioned before, this all assumes you have a copy of the contract in which to enforce it. If someone were to somehow get the contract from you before you enforced it, there'd be no proof the contract ever existed at all. And that's what I kind of touched on just a second ago. So if you were planning to break this contract, you may consider trying to steal it and or destroy it, so that there is no proof that you broke it, and therefore no consequences, or at least no legitimate consequences. And then, if somebody were to try to take revenge on you, you technically would be in legal right to, prosecute them. And so we have another screenshot here. This is the negotiation screen, where we can see that the names have been filled in, the items have been filled in. It looks like Brennan there wants to offer 10 gold coins, and Jonathan wants 15 for 30 ingots. And so they're probably going to have to work that down to 12 or 13 or something. But yeah, so here you can see that, I think that says 10. It's pretty low res on my monitor, unfortunately, but it looks like it says 10 and 15 to me. But yeah, so you have to obviously negotiate with these people, whether they're NPCs or real people, you'll have to negotiate. And then once you have decided on the terms, you can accept, and that contract will be signed into an item. So implicit contracts, these are the other type that we haven't talked about yet. Unlike explicit contracts, implicit contracts don't require participants to sign them to take effect, and they're instead initiated in other ways. The two best examples of implicit contracts are laws and enchanted or artifact items, and each one is initiated differently. Local, regional, and national leaders can draft laws as part of their region. Once signed as law, anyone who steps foot within their jurisdiction is bound by the implicit contract. This gives governments a huge amount of flexibility with respect to customizing what is and is not allowed within their domain, and what the consequences are. To make understanding the legal system easier, there are different types of contracts for different types of laws. There are contracts for tax code, criminal code, citizenship, land ownership, inheritance, and even more, and even government type. As with other types of contracts, it's impractical in most situations to advance your contract writing skill to a point where you can draft laws. Instead, you'll want to retain the services of a skilled contract writer to draft the laws on your behalf. You can then use the regional management UI to institute the laws. So that's really cool. This is probably the first game, at least that I'm aware of, where you have players ruling over other players who have full control over what type of government they are running, and all of the laws being enforced by that government. And so I'm sure that's going to lead to some pretty interesting situations. I would really like to see the first player-led rebellion against a player king. I think that would be a lot of fun to be a part of. So let's see, item contracts. This is really cool. It sort of reminds me of the Daedric artifacts in Skyrim a bit, although there are more consequences with these. The other common type of implicit contract are enchanted or artifact items. With these, simply equipping or wearing the item is enough to initiate the contract. Perhaps the most important example is the Ring of the King. Once someone with sufficient claim puts it on, they are bound by contract to fill the role of the king. This grants them all the benefits and privileges therein, but breach of contract means death and a land without leadership until the next person accepts the contract. So, I'm trying to think of what an example would be. In Skyrim, for example, I'm always going to go back to Skyrim because I love Skyrim. The Meridia's Beacon. When you pick up Meridia's Beacon out of the whatever chest it happens to spawn in for you, she starts talking and gives you a quest. In this game, for example, picking up her beacon would give you an implicit contract that you would go clear her shrine of whatever shades or whatever was in there, or you would face some kind of consequences. Or, for example, when you cleared that and claimed Dawnbreaker, the implicit contract might be that you would use that to slay undead in her name or something. And if you didn't slay undead with that sword in her name, if you were using it to go just randomly murder people in her name, you would probably face some kind of consequence for that too. So what's next? Next week we're going to backtrack slightly and talk about the skill system and skills in Chronicles of Elyria. So a little bit more meta, even though he said we were done, but that's cool. I'm interested in the meta more than anything, really. So you'll learn how skills are categorized, advanced, and most importantly, used to create some fun and amazing things. And in line with Chronicles of Elyria's design goal number 3, you'll learn how every skill the characters use requires some degree of player skill. So, very cool. Everything that you do is going to involve your skill to some degree. I know with blacksmithing, I think they've said if you wanted to craft a sword blade, for example, there's going to be a sword blade outline or silhouette on your screen, and then there's a certain, depending on your skill, there's a certain amount of leeway where you are able to draw, and you basically have to trace the shape of it within a certain amount of time. And the more accurate your shape tracing and the the amount of time you complete it in, the better the sword will be. And obviously, if you go outside those bounds or something, you might destroy the sword on accident or create something that's broken or not completely up to par. So yeah, we're going to be looking at some more meta game next time. I think for now we're just going to go ahead and leave this here. So as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to get involved, you can follow the link at the bottom right of this video. Please use my friend code if you wouldn't mind, if you're going to do that. And let's see, I will see you guys back here for part 8 of our design journals for Chronicles of Elyria.